Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Makkos Daf Kav, and we're starting about 12 lines from the bottom of Yud Testament Beis, 3 lines before the wide lines. Yosiv Rav Chanina v'Rav Hoshaya v'Ka miBaya Lahu. And there was a question that was being posed in the Beis Medrash. Apischa Yerushalayim Mahu. If a person is at the entrance to Yerushalayim Mahu, what's the halacha in regards to Meiser Sheni? The redeeming should happen outside, not inside. What should we do? So says the Gemara Pshita, what's obvious is as follows. Hu b'chutz maso bifnim, that if he is outside and his backpack is inside, kal tuhu mechitzos, the halacha is the mechitzos are kolate, and the halacha is he can no longer redeem. All the redeeming is done outside of Yerushalayim, then you bring it in. But you can't do the redeeming inside. What if hu bifnim masami b'chutz? What if it's reversed? He's standing inside the threshold of Yerushalayim, and his backpack is outside. So here we have a drasha. There was an older gentleman, a Rav, who was sitting in the back of the base medrash of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, and he quotes the pasuk in Chumash, Ki yirchak mimcha hamakom, and mi miluacha, your completeness. What does this mean? He holds that both you and your bag have to be in the same place, and therefore, if any part of you is inside, even if some part of you is outside, you can no longer redeem. Meiser Sheni can only be redeemed outside. Let's say that a person's holding a stick, and the stick has at the end of its bag, it has the that which he wants to redeem. So teku, we don't know if that would be different than a bag. Would it be the same as a bag? That part we just don't know. When would one be chayiv on Meiser Sheni? Meaning, when would a person be chayiv for eating Meiser Sheni that they're not supposed to eat? When would that be? Says the Gemara, only if the fruits have been brought into the city. Otherwise, there would be no chiyuv. Let's see what the details are. My time. Well, what's the reason behind Rabbi Yochanan's shita? The Amar Kra. One pasuk says, "Lifnei Hashem Elokecha Tochlanu." Another pasuk says, "Uchsiv lo sucha lechol bisharecha." And the Gemara creates an equation between these two things. When is it that, when do we say before Hashem you should eat it? Then we say, only when it's been put in front of Hashem, that's when you can say that there's an Isser. But that if the food hasn't been brought to Shalayim, then so food that's been designated as Meiser Sheni, it's on the way in, you get hungry on the way you eat it. It's not good, but it's not the Isser D'Oraisa that we're talking about. Only once it's been Ro'eh Pnei HaChoma, that's when the Isser kicks in. Says the Gemara Meisvei, hold on one second, we have a Brisa. This Brisa is from the Tosefta here in this Masechta. Rabbi Yossi Omer, let's say we have a Kohen, also be able to a Kohen, somebody gives him a date, they give him a fig, whatever, doesn't matter, a fig is the actual translation, but it's all tevel, and he's hungry. So what should he do? Now, on the one hand, he's allowed to eat because he's a Kohen, but the designation hasn't happened. So let's see what he should do. Omar, he should say, to Einazu, this fig that I'm holding, Trumasa be'ukta, the truma of this fig is going to be with the stem. Meiser Rishon Bitzfona, the Meiser Rishon will be the northern part of it. Meiser Sheni L'Droma, the Meiser Sheni will be the southern part. V'hishnas Meiser Sheni Hu B'Yerushalayim, O Meiser Ani Hu B'Gvulin. Either way, whatever the details are, anything that he could solve by doing the kriya, by calling it what it is, he can do that. That's not a problem. Ochla, he can eat it. There's only one problem. Turning to the top of Chaf and Aleph, and that is lo ke'achas. He will get one Isser. The Rishonim here explain what the problem is, that Trumas Meiser goes to a Levi, and while the Kohanim are from Shevet Levi, they are not Levim, and they're not allowed to eat that food. So he ate a food that he's not supposed to eat. The Zar she'achla lo keshtaim, if a Zar were to eat this food, he's lo keshtaim, because he ate the food of the Kohanim. That's all the previous stuff, the Truma, the Meiser Rishon, the Meiser Sheni. However, the Trumas Meiser is a separate Isser for Levim. So the Zar who eats it gets two. She'ilu b'tchila, had it been that he ate it in the beginning, if he ate it before any of it was designated, before the Kohen said it says the Truma, the northern part is gonna, before he did that, so then ein loke ela achas, and the Gemara makes a diuk from the Brisa. Taima, why is it that we said that you're going to be lo keshtayim? Why would the Zar be lo keshtayim? Because De'isei b'Yerushalayim. It's it already been in Yerushalayim. Habig Gvulin, but had it not been in Yerushalayim and it was in the Gvulin, lo keshalosh, the diuk would be that he should be chayiv 3. Da'afal gad lo rab pnei choma. This is a kasha against the Shita and the Gemara of Rav Yochanan. We learned 3 lines into the wide lines on the bottom of your Testament page, the Shita of Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan taught us that Rav Pnei Choma is when we trigger the Isser. Yet over here, the diuk in the Bryce is not that way. The diuk is that you can violate Isurim right and left without it ever having entered into Eretz Yisrael. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Da'ai Afke. We have to assume that in this case of the Brysa that we have in the Tosefta here, it's not a Brysa, it's a Tosefta, that it was Aile Afke, that it already was brought into Eretz Yisrael and then was brought out. Says the Gemara, if that's true, if your Okimta is that it was brought into Eretz Yisrael and then taken out, Ma'ila Memra, that's Pashut. Obviously, that everyone agrees if it's Ro Pnei Choma, that far is for sure. So if that's what you're saying happened, that's like reading a pasuk in Chumash and said, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'es haaretz. What it was Shamayim and it was Aretz. Good, stay in pasuk. I don't need your help. So why over here are we saying that this is the case, that it's Aile v'Afke? And what must be the case? Kigon de Ailinhu be'tivlaihu. When it was brought up to Eretz Yisrael, it was brought as full tevel. No hafrashos had happened whatsoever. Let's remember, you're trying to bring Meiser Sheni, but if you haven't brought Truma, Meiser Rishon, you haven't done anything else, it's still tevel. So if the food was brought into Eretz Yisrael, into Yerushalayim as tevel, what's the din? Must be the kasavar, matano shalohormu, kimi shehormu damyan. This is a nice idea, is that because we know that one is going to be Torem, he's a firm guy. At some point, he's going to do the Truma, he's going to do the Meiser. Because that's true, so then it's as if it's already done. That's a Chiddush. But that's what the Chiddush is of the Gemara. That's why we needed this case, which sounded very obvious. We needed to say the case was the Aile ve'Afke, but it was the Aile ve'Afke. It was brought into Eretz Yisrael as Tevel. And even though it was brought as Tevel, but we assume that something that's about to be Torem, it's Kimisha Hor Mudami, and therefore that's the Chiddush. Says the Gemara, yeah, but when you give this answer, you're touching up the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, which is what we saw on the bottom of your Testament base. That can't be. Says the Gemara, V'savar Rabbi Yossi, Matano Shelo Hormu Kimisha Hormu Dami. Are we able to say that he holds that the Tevel, even though it's going to be Huram, that even though it wasn't, it still is treated like it is? That's not true. V'hatznan, or at least it should be V'hatznan. 10 lines down, Rav Shem ben Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi hold? Lo nechleku beis Shammai and beis Hillel al peiros shelo nigmar malachton v'abri b'Yerushalayim. If the peiros were lo nigmar malachton, if they were not yet chayiv in trumos and maestros, for whatever reason, and they went through Yerushalayim, sheipadeh meiser sheni shalahen v'yochel b'chol makom. They have no din of having seen Yerushalayim. They were not prepared yet. Let's say there was no miruach, whatever the halachos are. It just wasn't shaykh yet to the world of trumos and maestros. So that's what Rabbi Yossi holds. But in regards to the machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, ve'alma nechleku, what then are Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel arguing about? Al peiros shenigmar malachton v'abri b'Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Yossi holds machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is when the fruits were nigmar malachton, they were shaykh by trumos and maasros, and they were brought into Eretz Yisrael. Beis Shammai omrim yachzer meiser sheni shalahem v'yochel b'Yerushalayim. Beis Shammai says they have to be brought back in and be eaten in Yerushalayim. So this is their machlok. Now, if you want to say, like we wanted to say in Rabbi Yossi, like we wanted to say in the Tosefta, that really anything that was shelo hormu is kimisha hormu damyan, if you want to say that, but why? There's already a psak on that. It entered in his tevel. So how can you say it's kimisha hormu? What? It wasn't hormu. You brought in not that way. You can't call something that's black, white, black. You can't do that. So therefore, how can you say that? And that's really a kasha in the shita of Beis Hillel, but we're not going to get into the lamdas of that. So the Gemara answers, don't worry. How can we get out of this scenario? Because, and this is a Gemara we've seen before, more than once, Amar Rabba, possibly Amar Rava. They were only one generation apart, and their names were so similar. So there's just dozens and dozens of times in Shas that whoever the editors were post the 4th century of Amoraim, when Rava left, they just made mistakes. And it's hard to tell. Sometimes it's handwriting, and sometimes it's an aleph, and sometimes it's a hey.
April was hard to come by, English hard to come by. So if you put a resh, everybody knows whether it's Rava or Rava until we know. It's just a theory. Can't prove it, but There are a
That's
lot of
interesting.
backs and forths like that. And it makes sense because they were literally transcribing from one,
At,
passage to
at
another.
that time, yeah. We didn't have a printing press till the 1400s. This was 1,000 years before, not even close. Yeah, but how do you know it's not Rebbe? Well, you know it's not Rebbe because Rebbe's a Tana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
So there's a framing
if
around.
you know, you know.
Yeah,
Like the rest of us.
very interesting. Nice theory. I don't know if it's true, but it's a nice theory.
A lot of changes you find are little things like that. Not just Robin Rubber, that's one example.
Well, I love the Mem Ayin Shin. It's either Meiser Sheni or Me'erev Shabbos. You don't know.
Usually you can tell that.
From the context, you can
Easier
tell.
than Robin Rubber, you should be able to tell that.
Correct. Correct. Very interesting. I wonder if it's true. So Amar Rabba or Rava. How do we answer up for Beis Hillel? Mechitza lechol deoraisa. In order for there to be a din mechitza, in order for there to be a din achila mi deoraisa, that's where the wall comes in. But mechitza liklo derabanan. But the fact that the food is brought in will then have a locked-in status that's only derabanan, and the chigaz derabanan ki isa be'ene. However, when did the rabbis say that the mechitzos were koltos? That's when it isa be'ene, when the food is ready to be used. But betivle lo gazer rabbanan. But when the food was brought in in the status of tevel, as was the case in this Mishnah that we just saw above, which is from Meiser Sheni lo gazer rabbanan. Now, earlier on this page, we had spoken about this idea. There was a diuk at the top of the page that a zar who ate from food that belonged to both a Kohen and a Levi would be lokesh time. And Ravina Amar could go into nakit le bekanya. Maybe that case was discussing where it was held by a stick, one person where he was inside and his food was outside Yerushalayim. The tifshar baya de baya papa, de baya de Rav Papa. It might be that this actually answers the question from the bottom of the page, which we ended in a teku. This is very rare, where the Gemara plants a teku and then later the teku is undone. That's what the Gemara seems to say. And Ravina lived later than Rav Papa. So under the assumption that Rav Papa lived before Ravina, and under the assumption that Ravina knew about Rav Papa's teku, he upshlugged Rav Papa's teku. So that just gives us a little insight into the process of giving something a teku versus, let's say, a kasha. Kasha is answerable. We just don't know the answer. Teku is unanswerable. So I don't know what the history is, how tekus began. I don't know how that is. But over here, we see that there's a tension between Rav Papa and Ravina as to whether or not this actually is a teku. Switching gears in regards to topic, we're done with Meiser Sheni. The Meiser Sheni, generally with Trumos and Maestros, it's one of those things that's so hard for us to relate to. When we give our Meiser Ksafim, we just do a math equation, hopefully. We just do a math equation. 10% of the net, whatever we do, our cheshbonos. But for us, it's really hard to relate to the Meiser Sheni and the Truma Gedola and the Truma Sema. It's very hard to relate. It really is very difficult. So here we're going to talk about haircuts. We are, of course, aware that there are multiple isurim. And today we're going to learn about the isur of making one's head bald out of anger or sadness from a death. We're going to talk about being makif rosh, which we'll learn in very specific terms. We'll also talk about shaving one's beard in a way that's inappropriate. We are all, of course, aware that priests used to be referred to and still are referred to as a galach. And the galach is from the word mitgaleach, which means to shave. So that's where some of our history comes in. The early Yidden and the early Christians didn't all look the same, so that once they started really deviating. Today, I met with one of my employees for adult circumcision business. So I said, "Oh, just being pleasant. How was your holiday?" She's like, I don't hold of it. I'm like, "Ooh, I didn't mean to be so." She's like, I grew up Baptist. They got it all wrong. They made this guy into a deity. And what are they talking about? I'm like, wow, someone's moving to West Rogers Park from Texas. We're gonna get a southerner up here. Fascinating. All right, so here's what the Gemara, the new Mishnah says, halfway down on Chaf Meral. If a person makes bald spots on their head, v'hamakiv peas rosho, or if they round the corners of their head, v'hamashchis peas zikano, and if a person literally destroys, we'll soon see that that's razor. If a person uses a razor on the corners of their zakan, the hasoret srita achas al hames, or if they cut themselves with a blade in sadness of a death, then chayev, you've done something wrong, you're chayev malkos. Remember our parak Elohein halokim. Sarat tzrita achas al chamisha mesim. If you do one cut for 5 people, o chamisha tzritos al mes echad, chayiv al kol achas ve'achas. You're chayiv on all of them. It's a very difficult line to understand. You did one cut for 5, are you chayiv 5? I still don't know what the line means. I'll have to see what the Gemara says. Al harosh shtayim achas mikan ve'achas mikan. When we talk about makif peas harosh, there's 2. That's at the temples. That's where the beard meets the hair, right? Al hazakan, on the beard itself, there are 5 spots that fall under the iser deoraisa of shaving. Shtayim mikan, v'shtayim mikan. There's 2, one at the temples, one a little bit lower, a little bit hard to tell from the Mishnah what it means. Ve'achas milamata, and one seemingly by the chin, but we don't have this access of where it is exactly. I called Rabbi Yonah Rishlita many years ago. It's always good to have a clean shave, but all of our things are not so good. So I said, is it mutter to just like down here, way off your face, is it mutter to use a razor? He didn't even blink for a second. The Rabbeinu Chanan al Maseches, so a few lines from the bottom, says that it's all part of the same Isser. It might be here, I didn't even look. I was just mystified by how quick, and I shouldn't have been mystified. That was my problem. Just such a master. Completely awesome. Completely awesome. The back you can do, but even halacha l'maaseh, you have to have a mirror if it's a guy who's doing it.
Really?
Separate problem. Nothing to do with this Mishnah. Just sakonos. It's just because of sakonos. There's something in the news a couple of months ago, maybe, of this. Yeah, I guess someone from another religion there was a Yiddish kid who went in to get his payas, and the guy just shaved it down to the scalp, and So the mother complained, and the guy did the other side, same thing. At least it was even at that point. But then here, there's a whole din. Did they do anything wrong? Obviously, they didn't want it. But makif versus nikaf, the one who did it versus the one who received it. We're going to discuss that a little bit today. So we've also discussed this in Sota. We had some of these conversations as well. All right, let's continue in the Mishnah. Rulazar Omer, im nitlu kulan ke'achas, if you hit all 5 spots in one fell swoop, enochai achas, ve'enochai ad shitlanu b'tar, it has to be only with a razor. So like, for example, what we use to shave, like a trimmer, so really the blade's not really touching your skin. It's close to your skin, but it's not actually touching your skin. That it might be usher for other reasons, but it's not the isser d'oraisa that we're looking at, that you can five Makkos. Rabbi Lazar Omer, even if you used something else, I'll have to figure out what that something else is, but these are other sharp items that are not a razor. Maybe it's the side of a blade. Maybe it's I don't know, what else is sharp? Maybe it is one of our types of machines, one of our trimmers. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbi teach us in the Brisa. We're about 12 lines from the bottom. Open of the Gemara on Chaf Amid Aleph. Lo yikruchu. No bald spots. Although this pasuk really is talking about a Kohen, so we'll soon extend this from a Kohen to a regular Jew. Lo yikruchu yachal afilu karach arba v'chamisha krichos le'chai v'la'achas. Let's say you made 4 or 5 bald spots. Maybe you're only chayv once. Tamalomar korcha le'chai v'al kol korcha v'korcha. Any bald spot that you create, you will be held accountable. Berosham, Matamud Lomar, Lefishan Emar Losis Godadu Velosasim Korcha Nechem Lameis. We have another pasuk that says Losis Godadu, you're not allowed to do this, any of the cutting, and Losasim Korcha Ben Nechem Lameis. And here the Ben Nechem is the same as by tefillin, above the hairline. We're not talking about cutting the hair, Beinin. That's not what we're talking about. That may be other issues, but that's not this issue. So the Gemara says over here, in the same spot as tefillin, because the pasuk over there says ben enechem lemissim. Maybe the only isser korcha is right between the eyes where the tefillin go. No. How do we know that it applies to the entire head, that there's going to be an isser of lo yikurchu korcha berosham all over the head, wherever you choose to make a spot? Talmud Omer berosham, the rabbos kol harosh. Ve'in liela kohanim, the kohanim. All I know is the kohanim, because the initial pasuk was talking about kohanim. Mechatesi, it applies to all of us who are Yisraelim. Says the Gemara, why would I have thought that it's only kohanim? Sheripa behena kasu mitzvos yiseros. We know that the kohanim have more mitzvos than we do. They have a higher standard. Whenever somebody has more restriction, they have more kedusha. So therefore, you have a Kohen. He's not allowed to go. He's not allowed to become tamid. Okay, the CRC made this map, but we're not to drive in Chicago if you're a Kohen. The trees overhang too much. So they have more restrictions. They have more kedusha. So they have mitzvos yiseros. Yisrael minayin yamar kan korcha v'nimral halan korcha malahalan chayv al kol korcha v'korcha v'chayv al rosh kebein. And just like over there by the Kohanim, it applies all over their head. Afkan chayav al kol korcha v'korcha v'chayav al harosh k'beinanan. Halacha applies both by Yisraelim and by Kohanim. If someone, due to the death of a family member, as part of their rebellion, they tear a head out, part of their anger, better than rebellion, they tear out their hair. We'll have to see what the parameters are to make sure where the Isser is triggered. That's going to be chai. And so too by the pasuk where it started by the Kohanim, it was only if I do it because I'm stressed, whatever the case may be, I have a lot going on over here and over there, my kids. That's not what we're talking about, Hani dalad behe krichos hechidami. What was the Mishnah talking about when it said dalad behe ilema hechidami? Ilema, if you want to say bezachar zelu chamesh asros pshita. Phil, don't do that. Bzz. Phil, don't do that. All right, that can't be. That's obviously not the ukimta that our Mishnah is talking about. Top of chafel mid base. Ella must be b'chad hasra mi mechayiv. You want to say it's only with one hasra? How could you be mechayiv multiple times? But it's not. Nazir shayishosa yain kol hayom eno chayiv elachas. He had one hasra. So if you have one hasra, how can you have five chiyuvim? If it would have been separated, al tishte, and then he drank, then you would have been chayv. But what's our case? We know it can't be 5 hasras because that's pashat. We know it can't be 1 hasra because it would only be chayv 1. So what's the case of our Mishnah where you're chayv on 5 korchos? What's the case? So Tzricha says the Gemara, chamesh etzbaos of nasha. You put this hair removal cream on each of your 5 fingers, and then ve'osvinhu bevas achas, and you touch 5 spots on your head at the same time with 1 hasra. Finger 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would never have said that. This Gemara?
No.
This is a Gemara, Nazir,
Concept.
and in Kedushin.
It's a depilatory.
Yes, you learned a word from the art scroll.
No, I never word from back.
Yeah, when it was in the art scroll. Yeah, in the art scroll. That's not a standard English word. Perforce is also not a standard English word.
I don't know what it means.
Nobody knows what it means. I would rather read the Hebrew. It's easier for me to learn the Hebrew art scroll than it is to learn the English art scroll in some cases. I mean, I read English faster by a little bit, but a depilatory, very good text. Yeah, I still don't know. Is that like therefore or? So that's the ukimt of our Gemara. One hasra applies to each. You only said 1 hasra, but it applies to all 5 of your fingers. I don't understand the lumdus. I'm just going to be clear. I don't. You're doing 1 maisa. Your maisa had 5 results, but you only did 1 thing. So like, how do you end up with 5 chiyuvim?
This is 1. This is 2. Meaning, if you're using your,
it's no different than 5 separate actions. That should be like the nazir that's eno chayiv alach.
Think of your fingers as your pencil.
Then it's 5 maisas. They should each have a separate asra.
But if one did it all at the time, I think.
You have to do it all, mamish.
I mean, it's hard to do it any other way.
How'd you do it?
What?
Just put your hand on your head.
Yeah, I'm saying you would have to be doing them all at once. So they're each a separate utensil, the hasra goes on each and every one of them.
This is not one hand. That's a chakira.
I mean, it's semantics. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Think of it as like that's the only way you can have a single hasra going all 5 at the same time. It's one action.
Rashi speaks this out a little bit. What?
It's one action using multiple.
It's the same spar, yeah.
Yeah.
But I would have thought they're all part of 1 hand, and I wouldn't have thought to separate them.
Can't say you're wrong.
Right.
You're correct.
I am wrong. No, I'm wrong. I'm pashat wrong. So Rashi, right. So if you look in Rashi, Dibra Maskil, the Mesvinu Bavas. Well, not really. It's separate muscles. Yeah. So Rashi, Dibra Maskil, Rashi says 10 lines down. The Kevan de Bevas, Rashi says like this. The Kevan de Bevas for 10 lines down, and the Rashi of it Usvinu Bevas Achas. The Kevan de Bevas Achas Ka'avid. My chaz is techayla hasra ahai etzbat tfei mehai. Meicha tesi that 1 finger is different than any other. Remember who's writing. This is not Rashi. Just want to remind you all. This is not Rashi. This is his son-in-law, the Rivan. Hasra safek lo mechshava. It's not hasra safek. The hasra akulhu etzbos shadia umancha. Hasra has been thrown and rests on each finger. Well, alter misbarer lo im choshesh hasra aso. Though, and each finger decides if the hasra is unbelievable.
Don't eat it, and then you have all day to eat it. But here,
He has to do it like mamish in 2 seconds because the hasra is always Shalom Rabbi Mori. Unbelievable. Well, you just have to touch it at the same time. No, we're not saying bum 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 bum. We're not just time at the same time. But each digit, you could have picked up your pinky and you didn't. I think that's kind of what the Rivan is saying a little bit. But he's adding, he does add a little bit more there by saying, which finger? By my ring finger, I was choshesh, so I picked up my ring finger.
That's not okay. That's not suffering is where you have the time that goes on, like we saw by eating the loaf, right? He's got all day to correct.
Yeah.
La alter misparer that I'm ignoring your hasra and saying afal pk on all five.
Oh.
It's not hasra suffix.
It's not hasra
suffix
suffix.
on each finger. He doesn't speak out the idea of it being 5 digits.
No.
I think that's what it has to be.
I didn't understand the end of Rashi the way you're saying it, but you're correct. I thought what he was saying is that you're making a choice with each finger.
I mean, it's a very long toast. The whole page. So
how much time do we have? Okay, that's what the Gemara says. Now let's talk about the shiurim. 6 lines down, chafam with beis, but kama shiur korcha. When we say that you made a bald spot, and this violation of Makkos, korcha berosham, of making a bald spot when somebody dies in the family and you're very sad about it. Just enough to see the scalp. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishum Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon Kegris. A gris is a very, very small shear. It's a bean. When we talk about a gris in halacha, we're talking about a shear of dam, more technically. I don't think they're the same. What? Taras too. So by us, we say that if there's a drop of blood, not on a badika cloth, on a badika cloth, there is no minimums. Any dot of blood would be possibly nida d'oraisa. But if there's a kesem, so if it's less than a gris, even if it's on a white garment that's mekamal tuma, and it's fire engine red, but it's less than a gris, we ignore. No problem at all. A couple can still be together. But once it's larger than a gris, so then we're choshesh. And the poskim explain that that's the size of a U.S. penny. So some poskim who paskin these things will take, if a woman brings in an undergarment, let's say like that, where she sees, or sheets, whatever she sees without a blood, they'll take a penny, they'll put it on the back side of the undergarment, and then they'll push it measure. And the blood, what? That's gonna be a problem. There's a bunch of hoarders who have stashes of pennies, though. Yeah, no, yeah. That was during COVID.
Where did they go? Now they can talk about
they're in the bunker that I built underneath my house. Right on Chase Avenue. I have room for all of you, yeah. Okay, so that was opinions 1 and 2, and then Kitanoi, we'll actually see it's a 3-way machlokes Tanoi and Kamashir Karcha Kigris, that's 1. Acher Momrim Kdeshir Meirosho, just enough to see the scalp. Amar Yehuda Bar Chaviva Pligi Batlasa Tanoi, there's another sheet, Chadamar Kigris, Vachadamar Kdeshir Meirosho, Vachadamar Kishtei Sairos. Woo, even 2 hairs. By the way, I just want to highlight that if Rahman al-Lisan, if there's a mace, if you pull out 2 hairs, that's this Isser. That's unbelievably sensitive in halacha. If somebody just kind of, according to the sheets, and you just violated that's what it looks like from only in a morning situation.
In theory, on a part of your head, you could get a razor?
No, you're mixing. We're only talking about the isser of lo yikruchu korcha barosha. There, the isser is to do something, to make your hair bald. How do we define making your hair bald? Pulling your hair out when somebody dies. What's the shear? This most machmer shita says 2 hairs. Mm-hmm. So, boom, 2 hairs come out after a mace dies. Isser d'oraisa. If you're doing it because of your sadness of the death, we're going to say something on a soapbox. It's not me. We as Jews don't behave that way. That's what the Torah is saying. That's not what we do. But the standard is so high. Like even people would just it's unbelievable. It's just halacha is so demanding. It's such a tall order. Okay. The ika demapik shtei sairos ma'ayel beche adasha. Some remove that sheet in the Tanaim of 2 hairs and they put in instead beche adasha, which is a tiny little nothing, a little bean, a little nothing, pearl of barley. B'simanech, how do we know which one it really is? Baheres kegris umichya beche adasha. 2 different types of of lesions of tsaras that have different shiurim, so it could be bichad dasha. Tana, anotel melo pi hazug b'Shabbos chayiv. If somebody uses pi hazug, which is scissors, they use them on Shabbos to cut hair chayiv. V'kama melo pi hazug amar Rabbi Yehuda shtaim. You cut two hairs with, you're cutting your eyebrows, you're cutting any two hairs. That's an isser deraisa. Gozes straight up. And afal pi that in the Torah, the gozes wasn't on people, but it was the shearing of the sheep to get the wool to make whatever they were making for them. It doesn't matter. It's the same exact ma'isa. Let's call it the tolda to the av. The Kama Mlopi Azug, we said Shtaim. The Tanya Lekorcha Shtaim. But it also says Shtaim over there. So why would you not just repeat the language? Your Gemara says you're right. Ema v'chein Lekorcha Shtaim. They're both the same shiur. Tanya Nami Hachi Anotam Mlopi Azug b'Shabbos Chayiv. The Kama Mlopi Azug Shtaim. Rabbi Lazar Omer Achas. It's even one hair. That's not how we paskin. We do paskin two hairs. However, the Gemara here adds in a very unique caveat. Umodim chachamim l'Rebbe Eliezer b'malaket levanos mitoch shchoros. That if there is a man who pulls a white hair from among the dark hairs, afilu achas, even one, shehu chayiv. This is a famous idea. But davar zeh afilu b'chol aser mishum shenemar lo yilbash gever simlas isha. If we have one, I taught this to my kids. My kids were like, "Don't worry, Dad. You'll never do it. You'll be bald." They're like, "Don't start pulling your gray hairs." I'm like, "I pay your tuition, so this is not nice. Thank you very much. I don't need your assistance." But this is the din, and this is a pretty well-known din that if among a patch of dark hairs you have one white one, you really should not be pulling it out. It might be an isur d'oraisa. Even one hair, pull it out is not right. It's lo yilbash gever simlas isha. These shilas come up. The Ramon Shulchan Aruch by Hilchos Purim allows for a man to dress like a woman, but not on Purim. You're not allowed. Big shilas came out in regards to can a woman wear pants as it relates to the reverse? Can a woman wear man's clothing? So this is one of the rare halachos where we kind of take a survey of society, and now women wearing pants is honestly, some pants are more modest than some skirts. I think the Israelis got into this culture. There's this pant skirt where like at the bottom of the leg it's fitted, but it's super baggy, like above the knees. It's actually pants. It's just super baggy. Is that better than a pair of fitted jeans? Yes. Is a Sanua skirt better than that? Yes. So, but there are different standards that come up, and a lot of the Beged Isha stuff, it's really problematic. So you have some men who wax their eyebrows. Is that considered Beged Isha? I don't know. When I go to Michael's to get my hair cut, there's men getting their eyebrows waxed all the time. So is that now Beged Isha? Okay, next. What?
Some people wear.
No, the pulling of the hair. The dogma of the Gemara is pulling that white hair. So it's a behavior. It's really not that. It's really not that. Makif peas rosho tanu rabon and peas rosho sof rosho bezu sof rosho zeha mashvetz dav laachore ozno ulupadachto. This is what the Gemara is saying, and sometimes you see these people where they cut their they have no beard and they cut their sideburn to be aligned with the top of their ear going straight forward. That is the Isser Deoraisa of rounding the sides of your head, is a straight line from above your ear, just like follow my glasses line. That would be the Isser Deoraisa if I shaved all that hair below, again, with a razor. Tanitana comment of Chisda, if you have a Jew who's getting the haircut and a Jew who's giving the haircut, they both get Makkos. So the Gemara says, why would you say that? Omar Le, lucky some guy who's sitting there eating dates, doing nothing wrong. I'm just sitting there. You're giving me a haircut. I'm none the wiser. Why am I getting Malkos? You're the one doing the Maisa. So it says the Gemara, Amar Lach Moni, if anybody asks you whose Shita that is, it says that you're Chayav Malkos for sitting there doing nothing in the chair. Rabbi Yehudi, the Amar Lav Shein Bo Maisa Lo Ken Alav. Says that's not even reasonable. How could you say that the guy getting the haircut is the one who did something wrong? It must be that it's Shita Rabbi Yehudi. Rava Omer b'makiv la'atzmo b'divrei hakol. He says, I disagree. The guy's giving himself a haircut. That must be the ukimta, and everyone agrees as to what's going on. He's makif and nikaf. He's both. He's giving himself a haircut. Ravashi Omar b'misayeh b'divrei hakol. No, he says really the guy in the chair is saying to the nikaf, I'm the makif. I tell the nikaf who's a yid, just cut a straight line right here. Just cut it. Just do the isser.
Yeah.
Sayeh.
Leaning his head, helping, helping, no?
Oh no, I didn't think so. No.
Whatever it is, he's assisting. Because
what does this mean in Rashi? Misayeya mazmin hasa'aros lamakif.
Yeah, he makes
he prepares
Makes it available.
the hairs.
Does your barber never like tip your head so that he can get to a better angle?
But this is different than the barber tipping your head. This
Right,
is-
well, he's
you're
tipping it
gonna
himself.
help yourself.
He's tipping it himself, exactly.
You mean the guy sitting there with a scalpel and I'm moving?
Yeah.
I'm moving
You're
to get cut.
Even if you would
The
say.
scalpel is still.
Say to me, could you please cut off my sideburns? You'd be potter. There's no shliach with Baravera. I'm the one doing the insert. It's only when you're helping me, but you can only help me by putting your head in a better position, whatever it is exactly.
I don't know what these words mean of ma.
It's to help.
No. Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom, says Mazmin hase'aros lamakiv. This means literally he prepares his hair. Oh, wait, lamakiv.
He makes it available to the guy with the razor.
That's the nikaf.
Correct. That's why he's got it.
This says makiv.
He's assisting.
Maybe.
No.
Maybe
No.
not. Maybe just the fact
No.
that it's here.
What I thought you were saying would have been Rashi saying Mazmin hase'aros lenikaf. He's preparing his hair for the cutter.
No, Makif is cut. Nikaf is the.
Oh yeah, sorry. That's correct. Absolutely, yes. So Mazmin hase'aros lemakif, for the one who's cutting.
Making them available for him.
So does that mean I'm holding up my hair? What does that mean?
Don't know exactly.
But
You
you
can
can
say
also-
it.
But it's not. You're saying it's not verbal.
No,
By the way,
you're assisting.
Monofshach, Misayel Dvaraver should always be potter, even if I'm helping you.
You're assisting.
So what?
Favor.
Look at the language. I'm not.
You're the Nikaf.
I'm not cutting. You're cutting. I'm holding up the hair.
Helping,
You're cutting.
you're helping cut.
Misayel Dvaraver. Monofshach. Until I'm cutting, I'm the Misayel.
I'm saying you could.
In the shiur I heard on this, they said even if you verbally tell the person, I don't know if that was mukhrach, but that was what they said.
I wonder why that would, that's very.
It's no different than holding up the hair. No, it's not. You're still not cutting.
Something. See, you have your own lichira. But I stick my head in your razor or whatever.
You're saying something different. You're saying the razor is still, and
No,
I'm going over to
because
you
I
and
don't
I'm like,
think-
no, the guy's cutting. So how am I? What's the misayeh?
But I'm not sitting there.
I'm
still.
sitting there still. I'm saying, cut this hair.
You put yourself in the chair in the
Right,
first place.
right. No.
No, David would not like that. That's not enough.
That's the say, whatever that means.
But you're still being misayeh. You should
Sure,
still be
sure.
potter. You're not cutting.
Sure you're not cutting, that's probably the Chiddush of the Gemara. Achara Maki, Achara Nikaf seems to be a Chiddush. Still didn't find it.
Yeah, I have no idea. Anyways, good question. Let's talk about the beard. The end of the beard, Vezu Sov Zakano, Shibolas Zakano Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom says it's Kulu Chamesh Peos Tikachashi B'mas Nisan. It's the 5 pi, it's again probably somewhere up here and somewhere down here and in the middle. We don't really know exactly. We just avoid the whole thing. Appa Pasha, we don't shave with the razor. Mam Shnisr Doraisa. Next. Short sugya, by the way, that's it with the beard. We're just like, don't shave with the razor. What?
We're showing, trying to understand where the spot is, so that's why we don't do anything. Don't do anything because we don't know where it is.
Even if we knew.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just keep cutting.
That's also, still though. Not that
Biggest
Yeah.
It's not that big.
I have some distant family members, maybe not so distant, who used to, when they were growing up, they shaved with a razor. And they said it was one of the hardest things to give up. Geschmack a shave with a razor. I hear
I
that.
would imagine.
I hear that. I totally hear that. Right up my alley. I totally hear that. It's a good thing I have a beard. All right, next. V'hamasaret srita achas, cutting into the flesh for a mace, meaning when somebody dies. Tan rabbanan v'seret. Yachal afilu seret al beis hashanafal. Maybe I'm doing this out of sadness because my house fell down. V'asvinaso shetzaba b'yam. My yacht fell apart. Talmud lomar lenefesh. And uchayiv ala mace bilvad. It's only for cutting for those purposes. No self-harm. U'minayin lemasaret chamish sritos al mace echad. Juchayiv al kol achas v'achas. Talmud lomar v'seret. Uchayiv al kol srita v'srita. Any cut. Rabbi Yossi omer minayin lemasaret srita achas. Al hey mesim shu chayiv al kol achas v'achas amal or lenefesh. The chayiv al kol nefesh v'nefesh. Says the Gemara, how can you use that word lenefesh? We literally used it 2 lines ago. To teach us that it's only when you kill somebody. It's only when somebody dies and then you do it. Not if your ship sinks and then you do it. But we just, now you want to say over here that lenefesh teaches us. Everybody says the Gemara, turning to the top of Chaval from Medalef Kasav Rabbi Yossi Srita Ugdida Achasi Uchsiv Hasam Lameis by Gdida, which is really Losis go to do. That's the pasuk. If you look on the side, Losis go to Banim Atam Hashem Elokechem Losis go to Losasim Korcha Bein Enechem Lameis. There it specifically says by and the pasuk it's quoted as Gdida, which is not what the pasuk says. It's Losis go to, but the Gemara says just like doesn't flesh it out, but there's a hekesh. Just like over there by Gdida, it says. Lo sosimu korcha ben enechem lemeis. So too by Sarita. Amar Shmuel, I disagree. Hamasaret bekli chayev. Rashi, very very lengthy Rashi. We've gone over here. Shmuel actually says that they're separate isurim. That's not what's mashma from the words here, but that is what he holds. So Meisvei, how can you say Shmuel that there's actually two isurim? Sarita ugdida achasi. There's different methodologies. So how then does Shmuel understand? Who the Amar Rabbi Yossi? He paskins like Rabbi Yossi that is taka true. That there are some differences. So we're going to stop right here. Oh, let's learn just to the two dots. Tani Tana coming to Rabbi Yochanan al mace. When it comes to a mace and you're doing this cutting. Bein biyad, bein bekli chayv. If you scratch it into your skin, or if you do it with a utensil chayv. Alavodas kol chavim. If you're doing it for the sake of idol worship, biyad chayv bekli pater. How can you say that? That's talking about with sharp objects. Ela you're right. Biyad pater bekli chayv the avodah zarah, to scratch with your hands for the sake of avodah zarah into your flesh is pater. To do so with the kli is chayv. We'll stop right here at v'chayv al roshim. Here's the Hashem. We'll pick up tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.